All right, let's get going. Good morning or good afternoon, depending where you are in the world. I want to thank you for joining us. Today we're here to talk about empowering automotive quality management. And I am your host today, Patrick Londa. I'm a marketing manager at SmartBear Software, specifically for the product Collaborator. All right. So recently I've been doing a lot of research around the automotive industry and some of the trends around the Internet of Cars and self-driving software, as well as also seeing what other verticals are doing when it comes to quality management. So before we dive in, I do just want to give make sure everyone understands who SmartBear is and what we're all about. We focus on providing software quality tools for teams. And specifically, our goal is to infuse quality and speed into your entire software development lifecycle. So I'm not going to get into the details, but what I do want to share is sort of the breadth of SmartBear's product portfolio, covering the entire software development lifecycle from development to testing to operations across both the API and UI layer as well. And our products enable teams to deliver the best software faster than ever. So for today, we're going to start off with sort of a big picture view of things, look at what the state of the industry is, and then dive into, what are some of the challenges in the development life cycle right now, look at some functional safety standards and the role that they play, and also how automotive OEMs have adapted, and how they choose their tools and how they go about their process to try to improve quality throughout the life cycle. And then we're going to have a quick Q&A. So if you have any questions, that's the time to ask. You can just put them into the GoToWebinar chat box, and we'll try to answer all of them. All right, so to kick off, we're going to look at some of the big trends in the industry. So first off, everything's going electric. We heard last week General Motors make the announcement that they are going to dedicate all of their future product roadmaps to electric vehicles. And at the same time, we hear Ford is shifting 1/3 of its internal combustion engine investments to electric cars. And Volvo also is saying that by 2019, it's only going to be making electric and hybrid cars. And you can also sort of see the impact of Tesla over the years, sort of pushing a lot of these more establishment automotive companies in that direction. So that's a big trend in the industry, and at the same time, there's also a trend around the idea of cyber networks for cars and autonomous driving. And with that comes a lot of new technologies that are needed to realize that goal. So cars will need to be connected in networks to optimize for traffic, and while also being secure and safe from cyber attacks. As drivers take their hands off the wheel, the burden of risk is going to shift more and more to the hardware and the software in the car. So this trend is especially likely to impact product development for automotive manufacturers, because the way that we assess risk is going to have to change slightly when you don't have a driver there to take some of the responsibility. And then another trend that probably isn't getting as much immediate coverage, but is quite concerning, I would say, is that recalls for the automotive industry in general have been on the rise recently. Especially, you can see it in the last few years. And with this graph alone, you might say, what's happening? Well, if you look at the total number of cars affected by recalls, which is this graph, it might seem that a few major recalls are accounting for this major spike. And that's definitely part of it. The latest major recall was triggered because of a safety defect in Takata airbags, and this recall alone is estimated to affect 42 million vehicles in the U.S. So the recalls overall are gaining in size, but that's not the only problem. We also have an issue when it comes to the number of recalls, and this has been a steadily increasing trend over the last 2 decades. So you saw in 2014, for example, it hit the record number of recalls issued in a year, and this is specifically in the U.S., with 775. 2015 beat that with 869, and then again 2016 followed suit and took the record with 927 recalls. So quality management is built into the development process with the intention of preventing these kinds of defects, But this trend is evidence that there's room for and a great need for improvement across the industry. So what are the challenges for the development life cycle? Where are the pain points in this process? So there's a few things that I want to touch on briefly, and then we'll sort of dive into some more details. But first off, as I'm sure most of you know all too well, the automotive industry is highly regulated. Quality management and documentation components in the development process can be burdensome and time-consuming. And as a result, many highly regulated companies end up with complex development processes or inefficient organizational structures. And often products are developed in silos, which can stifle the cross-pollination of technologies and innovation overall. And this can also be a roadblock for organizations that are trying to adopt a more agile approach because it's harder to work cross-functionally across different departments. And then lastly, there's a sort of an increase in competition. You're starting to see tech companies come into this space a little bit, with Google developing its own car. There's still rumors that Apple is working on a vehicle of their own. And in general, as cars become more like computers, you're going to see tech companies enter. And there's also more countries around the world competing than ever before. So with that, it becomes a lot harder to maintain the same product roadmap over time, because these companies need to be adapting to the market and making adjustments as they see fit. So we're going to eat our vegetables and talk about functional safety standards really quick. This stuff's a little bit dry, but very important to know. So first off, we're going to talk about ISO or TS 16949. This is a quality management standard, and this sort of ensures that there are checks and balances in the supply chain. Established by the International Automotive Task Force, this specific standard was meant to try to harmonize standards across countries to try to reduce some of that red tape and compliance time. And the big things in this one are that it requires documentation controls, records retention, and process measurement. And yeah, it's sort of similar to ISO 9001, renewed every 3 years. And it just recently was superseded by IATF 16949 in 2016. And the big change there is that now total productive maintenance systems are required. So that means that there needs to be a system in place to continuously maintain and improve the integrity of each part of the production life cycle, whether that's machines and equipment or people and processes. So pretty dry, but this is at the company level. So you're not going to see this at the system level. This is a company level quality management standard, and that differs from probably the more popular standard in the industry, which is ISO 26262, published in 2011. And this standard, which I'm sure some of you are familiar with, sets up risk assessments throughout your process for system functional safety. So that's assessing your process at the system level. So if it's an anti-lock brake system or electric, all these different systems in the car get assessed through this process. So it's about risk assessment, it's about process improvement. And each step of the process gets a automotive safety integrity level, and those go from the lowest risk, which are called QM managed, up to D, which is the highest level of risk. And companies need to come up with a process plan to mitigate these risks, and then follow up with reviews to verify and validate their plans. And the concepts of verification and validation are really important for this standard as sort of pillars of compliance, especially important when it comes to tools. So some tools can get officially certified to comply with this standard, while companies can certify internally and make it work for them. And we've had customers mention to us that ISO 26262 is one of the first things that they look to when they're evaluating tools. So another standard to look at, some companies look to this more than others. This is Automotive SPICE, or SPICE. It's slightly different than ISO 26262 in that it relies more heavily on process assessment models and isn't as prevalently recognized. Again, you could get lost in the details for either of these functional safety standards. But the important thing to know is that they both focus on process improvement rather than trying to standardize product improvement. So that means that even when fully electric, self-driving cars rule the road, these standards won't need to adapt all that dramatically because they are focused on the process each step of the way and making sure that you have sort of safety nets in place. So we've seen changes in the industry. We've heard about the safety standards. How have automotive OEMs adapted over the years? And the answer is that for the most part, they've been trying to bring in new technologies. So 3D printing is an answer for design teams to quickly iterate and speed up their prototyping process because they can do it all internally now. So you see companies like Ford, Mitsubishi, GM, BMW, Chrysler, and many others have all adopted this to sort of increase the efficiency of their prototyping process. In addition, you see a lot of simulation CAD software being used. This probably predates 3D printing in the automotive industry, but it's sort of constantly being improved and its uses are expanded. So we hear a lot of customers using Simulink as one of their tools for that. When it comes to sort of trying to manage all the process around their design. And then we also have development teams adopting new tools to speed up their development timelines, from project management tools like Jira and Confluence to different communication channels like face-to-face web conferencing for global teams and Slack or GChat for messaging. And these communications and project management tools are especially useful for teams that are moving towards agile or agile approaches, best known for their rapid dev cycles and focus on cross-functional collaboration. So, all right, how do you choose the right tools? What are some criteria to base your search on? And I'm sure the tools teams at most companies are heavily invested in this and sort of have a long process already. But just a few things to look at. You want to make sure that obviously compliance with functional safety standards is a big priority. And then besides that, you want to also make sure that the tools are a good fit for your team, so that it can support your current rules and your current processes, and it can support how your team wants to interact. So especially if you have a global team or a team that's distributed, then you want to make sure that that tool or whatever tools you're using can easily be used remotely, and that you can maybe have multiple users. So that's a consideration when you're going through that process. You also want to make sure that it integrates with existing tools and systems. A lot of automotive companies have legacy systems or databases that they need to tie in. So making sure that the tools that you're choosing can integrate with those existing tools is also really important. Additionally, you want to make sure that your tools can allow for cross-department communication. We'll get into that in a second in a little bit more depth. And then also, you want to make sure that you can get some metrics out of your tools, so you can see how well you're using them, and not just say, oh, we have that. You want some process visibility into how well you're utilizing that tool. So as far as making sure that you can have tools that can be sort of easily transferable, what I mean by this is around this concept that's really popular in manufacturing overall right now called the digital thread. Basically, a digital thread is a complete record of communications around the development process that produces each part. So when you create this thread, audit trails become more comprehensive and easier to follow, defects become easier to remedy, and process improvements get a lot more data-driven. So basically trying to increase the visibility across these silos and making sure that testing can see exactly what the conversation that design had was. How much time was spent on code reviews if you're looking at development. So also making sure that the tools that you're using have firm benchmarks and KPIs that you can establish, because really that's going to be the key to getting that process visibility. So now we're going to talk just a little bit about our code and document review tool called Collaborator and sort of where it fits in and the benefit that it's been providing to a lot of automotive companies recently. And it's really all around this concept of peer reviews and code reviews and document reviews. So I do want to launch a quick poll and get a sense of where you guys are at, and ask, are you satisfied with how your team currently conducts code reviews? Yeah, just I'll give you a minute to fill in an answer there, and then we'll see what the results are. All right, I'm gonna close the poll now. Show the results. All right, so it looks like, all right, we have one person who's killing it. You know, their process is exactly what they want it to be, or at least 25%. Our current process is really dragging down the team, seems to be the majority answer. And then we also have, you know, my team doesn't need to do code reviews. That's totally fair. You know, depending on what your role is at your company. But yeah, we typically get that the current process is dragging down our team as the primary answer. So let's dive into that a little bit and get to some of the root causes there. A lot of people ignore code reviews or don't think of them as opportunities to drive quality. And part of this is because reviews can often take too much time. They can be seen as sort of extra and not necessarily as part of the sort of part of the process inherently. They're seen as, oh, this is something that we tack on to make sure that everyone's okay with what we're doing. And then also, you know, comments are seen as subjective. You know, oh, maybe that's just Jim's preference there. You know, maybe he's not. Maybe he didn't spend a lot of time on that. And it's also difficult if you have a global team. Again, doing all these remote reviews can be quite challenging. And then because it's such a highly regulated industry, recording those conversations also gets pretty difficult if you don't have a tool that's set up that way. Because you know, if you're doing meeting-based code review or tool or over-the-shoulder code reviews, it can be tough to get that. What was the conversation around this change that was made? It can be really difficult to get that locked down sometimes. So that's where Collaborator comes in. So Collaborator is a code and document review solution, and it's probably the industry leader when it comes to tailoring its solution around highly regulated industries, because it is so good fitting the current process, integrating with your current tools, and then also being very much compliance ready. So one thing that separates Collaborator from the rest is that we have customizable review templates and workflows. So what that means is, you know, you're able to set up review checklists and review groups and participant notifications, so that whatever your current workflow is, or maybe whatever your best workflow is, we can fit that workflow instead of your team having to adopt the workflow of whatever tool might be most convenient. So by Collaborator tailoring its capabilities to the workflow that fits your team best, it's really good setting up across departments. Whether you're doing design document review, you know, you can set up custom templates around that for peer reviews, or if you're just doing a review of source code, you know, you can say, for this kind of block of code, all right, let's have three reviewers, one observer because someone new just joined the team. You know, you can really set it to whatever your heart's content is. And then additionally, reporting and compliance are major benefits when it comes to Collaborator. We capture your entire conversation thread around, you know, why was this change made, who made it, when did they make it, and we make it really easy. You can just export it in a zip file and hand it over to auditors if they have questions around that. And then we also have industry-leading integrations. So you know, you can see some of the integrations on the screen, notably Jira, Eclipse, Visual Studio, PTC. If you're currently using GitHub, Bitbucket, GitLab, we integrate with all of those, as well as Microsoft Office. We have specific integrations with Microsoft Word and Excel. So really powerful when it comes to reviewing PDFs. You know, whether you're doing requirements reviews, looking at design documents, artifacts, test cases, user stories, or just sort of basic source code review. Collaborator is really good at bringing the whole team together in one solution to try to improve quality while simultaneously creating that comprehensive audit trail. And we're just going to take a quick look at, so this is an example of a template. You can see we've got a checklist. You know, all these are custom fields. You can set up whatever you want to review as a team. And then you can add participants. You can see what the defect log is and what the conversation around that defect is as well. So we're going to say this review is completed. We're going to send it to completed. And now we can save it to zip. So that's a simple export, and you can see everything that was, you know, that went down on this review in a really nice PDF where we outline a basic review detail report where you can go through and you can say these are how many defects, you know, this is who checked off different lines of the checklist, and this is when. So this is really great if you have auditors or if you're even trying to improve internally to make sure that, you know, you can see what the full story is. And we also have custom reports, so you can customize these reports to fit whatever your need is. So if you're looking at, okay, how many defects did we find in the last 2 weeks, or, you know, how much time is this team spending doing reviews, or how effective are they at doing these reviews? Are they finding defects? So all those reports can be customly tailored to fit whatever your process is. All right, so now we're going to go into question and answers. If you have any questions, you know, just put them into the GoToWebinar chat, and we will be happy to address them. I think I also have Justin Collier on the line, the product owner for Collaborator. So you know, we're more than happy to answer any questions that you have. We'll just give you a second to put in any questions. All right. Okay. So we've got one question coming in. Is there a roadmap of planned features available with a release schedule? And this person is already using Collaborator. That's a good question. So let's see, Justin, are you on the line?
I am. Yeah. Thanks, Patrick. So yeah, the best thing to do if you've got specific questions around the roadmap and kind of what our plans are, et cetera, is reach out to your customer success advisor or reach out to your account manager, and we can work with them to make sure that we give you the information regarding releases, kind of what's planned and what's upcoming as we look at our roadmap. But it's not just generally posted or available online.
Okay, and also just to follow up, that person who's currently using Collaborator was the one who answered, my reviews are perfect. So that's fantastic to hear. Let's see. All right, we have another question. How the integration with PTC works? Just a quick summary.
Sure. So Collaborator integrates with a number of different SCMs, and with PTC, we have our Collaborator client, which is integrated directly with the SCM. It allows you to grab different change packages and put those into a review. So any of the files that would be part of those change packages would automatically get added to a review when you go through the review creation process. And then if you need to upload additional changes as you go through that review process, you can do that as well.
Okay,
so
perfect.
Question.
Let's see. How easily does Collaborator work with Git? Is there a lot of work required to gatekeep check-ins?
So yeah, we have a great Git integration. In fact, we use Git here internally for Collaborator, so we're pretty familiar with, you know, kind of Git and its workflow and how things behave with it. So we do offer great integration there with Git. As far as being able to gate check-ins, yes, you can do that as well.
So I think that's all the questions that we have right now. If you have any follow-up questions, you know, feel free to reach out to either Justin or I, and we'll be happy to get back to you with answers around whatever questions you might have. We're also, you available to set up demos if anyone's interested in seeing sort of what the full product looks like and getting a little bit more of an in-depth view than just sort of seeing that snapshot of templates and reporting. We're more than happy to give you a deep dive into all the features and what exactly code review and document review would look like for your teams. And then we also do offer a free 30-day trial of Collaborator. So that's available right now on smartbear.com if you're interested in going in and checking it out. And again, we have a great support team, so if you have any questions around that, they're more than happy to help you out along the way. All right, perfect. Well, I want to thank everyone for joining today. I hope you got a lot out of it. It's a really interesting industry right now. A lot of changes, but I think there's a good attitude towards quality management right now. So it's really encouraging. All right, thank you again for joining, and have a good day.